Okay, so this afternoon I made a DSA logo in Blender, and I just wanted to go over and show you guys and girls how the files are laid out and how you can go in and edit it. The files we're talking about are these here. Um, the first, these NADSA. The first file I started with was this one. The .ai was provided by Sam. That was the original artwork, and what I did is split it up into four PNGs. One has a color image and the other has non-color data that we can later use for height maps and other special effects and those kinds of things you'll see later. The actual thing that you'll get will be a blend file like this. And the naming convention is just V1 is version 1, B1 is build 1, and this was build 2. And ignore the blend 1. Those are just crash files. In case Blender crashes, it recovers from those backup files. So really, you'll get a file that will look similar to this one. And what you'll do is open it up in Blender. Now, to get Blender, it is free. You go to blender.org. But because these have an asset library to make reuse in the future easier, I'm using an experimental version of version 3.00. It's an alpha build. So in order to get that, you'll have to go to the download page, but then there's an experimental build section below. Go to experimental builds and it'll have all the daily builds from the build bot. And soon a 3 will be released, so you'll be able to get you'll be able to get it directly from the download page. But as long as I'm using an alpha release, which is experimental, you'll have to actually download it here. So if you click that, it'll download the version for your operating system, and you just install it. It's a free file. The software is always free. It's open source, and it's written mostly in Python, so it's easy to edit. Once you install Blender, you'll launch it and it'll look like this if it's version 3.0. And you'll go in and open up the logo. This is the latest one. And here's the file, and I'll show you what I have here. We're going to start over here in this collection on the right-hand side. The first collection, these collections allow you to separate the objects as well as render them separately and organize them. So it's just an organization. Think of it sort of like folders. Um, but I've got the primary collection, and there's a studio collection that has lighting, lights, backgrounds, that kind of thing, and then the cameras. And what these icons mean, these arrows means you can select the object in the window over here. The eye means you can see the object in the 3D view over here. And the little camera icon means it will actually render the object and when you do the final render. And so what I've done, I've got the studio collection of things that we can adjust independently as far as lighting and environments. And for the world, I've just generated a procedural universe of star field, and you'll see some nebula and little things in the background. Um, those can go away with a click. That's just for animation purposes if you need a space background. I'll show you how to get rid of the world by making it transparent with just one click of the button. So um, let's move on. I'm going to minimize the studio collection because we don't really need to go into that. It's all set up for you. I have a 3-point lighting set up, which is sort of a Hollywood style lighting, but you'll probably want to use the sun for this universe setup in studio. We can adjust these later. And to adjust the strength, for example, for the lighting, we just select the lighting down here. And here is the strength setting. So you can adjust the strength as well as the color of the lighting. And anytime there's a color of an object, all we have to do to change the color is just click the color. And you have a color selection wheel. You can adjust the slider values here. You can input RGB, hue saturation values, or hex decimal value directly into the editor. Or what we can do to match values if we have an image, and that's what I did for Sam's art, is there's a color picker. And so once I got his original artwork into the memory, I was just able to match the colors by picking them off of the original artwork. That way we got an exact match. Okay, so I'm going to close the studio collection. And the mesh collection is just all of our geometry data. And I have two different packages there. I have the logo, and I also have the patch. What I call the patch is just a simple NADSA acronym with a background. And you'll see the difference between the two. And the beauty of it is that you can just switch between the two, and all of the elements are separate, so you can mix and match between them, and we can edit the text, as you want. Now, here you're looking at the 3D view. You can see I've got the original plane, which was the artwork that Sam did, but then I'm able to take his artwork and mimic the 3D objects on top of that. So I'm going to switch over to render view, and you'll see what I'm talking about. This is the original art that he did. And then what I've done, I've taken the 3D text here, and I've just simply copied it. I made a 3D version of his 2D text. So now that can be animated, or you can make it stand out to get shadow effects and that kind of thing. So this first package is just the I'll call it just the patch, and you can see it's all 3D. You can animate, do whatever you want. Typically what you want is just a straight on full look that you'll render as a PNG or SVG, and you'll use that for your final logos. None of these lines or blocks show up. So I'll go ahead and move on from the patch demo here, and we're going to look at what the logo looks like. I'm just going to hide this for now and reveal this. And what you can see here, I've done the same thing. It started with let me expand this. It started with his background, the same as I did before. Here's I just did a import images plane. If you go to add mesh, no, I'm sorry, add images plane, you can bring in the original image as a plane. And then what I did was create the 3D objects for the other things around it. So here we have his, let me make it so I can select these here. Here we have his plane. I added a blue shield because I had to recreate the background, and if we wanted to change the font, I needed a fresh background. So all I did was just create a blue circle, a 3D circle, and gave it some textures, a color, and a bevel on the edge to catch the light. Same thing for the text here. I just added an extrusion to give it a 3D depth and a bevel on the edge, so you can see how it catches the lighting here. That'll give it a nice effect. And right now, the original artwork here is still 2D, but with that image data I showed when I made a grayscale version, you can take that data and we can make basically a bump map, a normal map for this 2D image, and make it look like a 3D image without having to model anything stand out. As far as the text, let's go back to the text now, because that's the main reason for this whole damn exercise. The way this text works, I actually have, I'm going to get rid of everything but just the text. There is a circle, and what I've done is I've parented the text to the circle. That way, if we move the circle, the text goes with it. An advantage of that is if you want to rotate the text, say like a scroll thing, you can easily do that because it's attached to the circle. You can also, by it being attached to the curve, we can undo it to see what the straight text looks like. I'm going to go now over to the text frame. I'm going to hide some of these others real quick. And what you can see, here's the actual curve, the circle, and here's the actual text. And under the text, I've done it with a, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to write it. I have a few modifiers here just to give us the thickness and subsurface and things that we need in the curve. Once the text is finalized, you'll want to apply the modifiers to speed things up. Let's go back to the text though. The text file here, and if you go down to the properties tab for the text, this is where we can change the font here. And this is the NADSA font. And all you do if you want a different font, you just open it and choose the font you want, and the text will update appropriately. Once we get the text finalized as the font, you'll convert all of that into a mesh. That way we can do things like add the cross in the A, or fix the E so it doesn't look like a 3, or whatever you want to do. You can modify it from there. But for now, this is basically like a word editor at this point, word processor. Here's the font. We can adjust the geometry. Here's where I added the extrusion to get the 3D effect. And oops, there was also the bevel effect here. I added a bevel. Here's the font. Here we can adjust the size, and I actually had to drop down the size just a little bit in order to fit the full text in around the circle. Sam, originally, if you use the same size as he did as the middle text, it won't all fit. But I was able to scale it down just a little. We can adjust it, or you know, whatever, just by this value. And then really that's about it. The curve happens through the modifier. The text is just plain text, and there is a way that you can, under here, here the text on the curve, but a better way to do it, because you'll cause kerning and other distortions like Dallas was mentioning on the Discord. A better way to do it is with a non-destructive modifier. So what I've done, instead of using this here and selecting the curve, what I did was use a curve modifier and select the curve there. This gives us some more control. I didn't really need it for this. We're just using the x-axis, but this is a much better option. And to kind of show you sort of a before and after, what I mean by non-destructive, all we have to do is take this away, disable the modifier, and we have our original text. We didn't destroy any of the original data. And that's the beauty of working this way in Blender. We can experiment all day long and still go back to what we originally had. And you can see, even when we get rid of the distortion of the curve, it still is pretty ugly, like this Alabama. So let's just, I'll just show you some of the features there. So we've lost the curve, and of course, to put it back, we just attach it to the curve again. But let's go back to the editing here, and we can show you some of the options. Under the font itself, here's where we can adjust some of the word spacing. Notice how the M and the A here meet. We want to avoid that. So ideally, you'd want to go and add just a little bit to the character spacing. Now the scales are going to be weird, so when I add a little here, it's probably going to jump a lot. Not too bad. But you can see, you know, you can do it in small increments. But what we've done is added spacing. Now, ideally, as long as you get this geometry separated enough so they're not intersecting, there's no need to adjust it. I would leave this as the normal one. And then once you get the text converted, you know, like I said, you don't want it joined here, but once you get that converted into a mesh, you're able to go in and actually tweak these on a pixel, a per pixel basis. And here you can see this is a text object, so I can't really do much. If I go into edit mode with the tab, it's going to allow me to change the text like a word processor, but I can't really change the geometry of the thing itself. So what you'll do is, once you have the text finalized, you'll convert it into mesh geometry. You'll go to Object, Convert to Mesh, and then at that point, this has already been done on the other demo I have for the patch. Now at this point, what you can do is, in your text, I've created a vertex group. And what that does, I've separated each of the vertices of the geometry into groups. So DSA is one group and NA letters are another group. And that's how I got the different materials, the different colors assigned to each one. So once I converted the font to the geometry and the mesh, I created the separate vertex groups that I needed. And now I can separate those into individual letters, however you need to separate them up to do what you want to do. And then for the materials down here on the materials tab is where I assign the vertices black and white um, to get the colors you want. So if we wanted, say, all white text here, and this goes for any element, to change any element, all you have to do is go to the color and now if we wanted, or did I select black? Yeah. Here's the base color. I selected the wrong one. The base color. Now that we got that, you can go through and change, experiment or adjust the colors any way you want. And again, the color selection is the same. You can use the value sliders, input the value directly, or use the color picker, whatever you like. So that's basically it. What you should be able to do now, all the files will be included and they're packed into this single blend file. And I'll try to label everything where it's sort of best I can, self-explanatory, and everything should be labeled. And then what you'll be able to do is go in and just experiment and play around with the text, the fonts, and in the future, if you want to make any edits, that's no problem. You can go in, like I said, just like a word processor, and you'll be good to go. We can do any colors, any geometry. Oh, one final thing. Let me go back to the text for a second. Show you the editing mode for the geometry briefly. If we have our text, select the text, if I hit tab into edit mode, now I see our geometry. And ideally, you would want to go in and clean this up. A lot of these lines and pixels, the vertices are not necessary for this geometry. So it could be cleaned up a lot to speed it up. But for this little bitty project, it's probably not worth the time to do that. But what we could do when it comes to fixing things, say like for the A, um, what we can do is just go in and edit it, extrude it if we want. And um, the way that works is you basically just select some the pixels that you want. I hit A twice to unselect all. A selects, brings up select, and A again you can select. Now you can see the pixels here. If I go in, sorry, the vertices here, I can select individual vertices. And if I want to fix the A, I just extrude them or change the geometry however we need to do to fix the letters or if there's any imperfection. That's basically just how you go in and edit the geometry. But we first start with the font, and then like I said, once the font is finalized and how you want it, we convert it into geometry. And then once we have it into the mesh geometry, you can do anything you especially with nodes. And the only thing I'll really show you on nodes, if we're going to go up here into shading mode, and I'll show you quickly how I did the universe. I'm going to hit Control Space while my mouse is in this window just to bring it full screen. And I'm going to select the world. And this was the node tree that I used to do the world. And what this does is creates a star field, and the little blue nebula that you see in the background is there. And using these mappings, you can change the location, rotation, or scale of any of the fields. You can also adjust the noise. I'm basically just using noise textures to create the stars and the nebula. And so this is the node, and all of the nodes are saved as assets in here. And if I go into object shading mode, here you can see all of the materials that I've created. So we can create any new material and assign it to any of the objects that you want. Just to give an example for the patch, even though it's a 2D material, what I've done is bring in this non-color version, and we should be able, through a color ramp, adjust the value and then feed that into a bump map. In this case, it's going to normal and displacement, but what we do is create a relief map, basically a bump map,